Okay, today I have a very particular hill that I want to die on. And to this day, it is the TikTok that has brought me the most heat. I have gone after Islam and Christianity and astrology. I've gone after the political left and the right. I have a bone to pick with everyone. But to this day, this has been the TikTok that has gotten me in the most trouble. And I had messages for months about it and hate mail for months about it, which is my opinion that the Polar Express sucks. And I'm not talking about like as a snooty movie buff, I hate it. And I'm not talking about the CGI. I'm not talking about the dead eyes or Tom Hanks playing all the parts or the annoying kid that you want to punch in the face. I'm talking about how much I hate this movie as a religious deconstruction coach. It is gaslighting bullshit, and I will die on this hill. But before I go on and explain myself and also talk about whether or not you should lie to your kids about Santa, just know that if you're younger than me, there's a nostalgia bias here that I'm going to probably run up against called rosy retrospection. And so I know that if you're younger than me, you probably got Polar Express as your Christmas movie. That was the golden ticket that you got at school and you watched it and had hot chocolate. And there's some nostalgia with that. But just give me a chance and hear it out. But just give me a chance and hear me out. So, we start this movie with some attempts at critical thinking. He's looking up the North Pole. He sees that mall Santas are different. He's doing some very beginning work of critical thinking, and we should be praising this. He's asking some incredibly valid questions. But are we going to do that? No, we are going to shame him for this and terrify him for this. So, he gets on the train. I'm not going to tell the whole story here, just the parts that are relevant to me. And this kid that we should be praising for his budding critical thinking skills, we terrify him. So not only is this clown puppet scene terrifying, but do you know that they are screaming at him? They're screaming at him, "You're a doubter. You're a doubter. You don't believe."
You're a doubter! A doubter! You don't believe! You're a doubter! You don't believe!
That is terrible. Like, why are we shaming critical thinking? Why are we screaming at children that being a doubter is the worst possible thing that you could be? This scene is awful. I hate it. If I watch it with my kids, I honestly skip it every time. Then at the end of the movie, while he's wrestling with his brain and this pressure to believe, or you're a terrible person and you're a doubter and creepy clowns are going to scream at you, he finally says, "Okay, okay, I believed." And it's seen as this pinnacle moment. Yay! You turned off your brain and your questions and you chose to believe. And then the nail in the coffin, because like maybe for a kid and for Santa, like it's not that bad and I'm being extra. But what I hate about the ending is that the happy ending is that the kid believes in Santa for the rest of his life. When everybody else becomes adults and the bell doesn't ring for them anymore because their brains develop, we are cheering that this now old man still believes in Santa.
Even Sarah found one Christmas that she could no longer hear its sweet sound. Though I've grown old, the bell still rings for me, as it does for all who truly believe.
How is that a happy ending? Like, yay, he's not a doubter. Yay, he pushed his critical thinking to the side so much and chose belief so much, and his belief is so strong that he's now in the world of full-on delusion. Like, if your uncle or your dad or your grandpa still believed in Santa, we would not clap and say, "Wow, that's beautiful." We would say, that's very delusional. I'm very concerned. So I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. And I realize that I'm being super dramatic, but you have to remember that my job as a religious deconstruction coach is I hold thousands and thousands of stories of people who repressed their inner voice and their brain and their conscience in order to value belief. And it begs the question, why is belief a moral virtue? Why is faith a moral virtue at all? Why are we celebrating belief as a moral virtue and modeling it for children? What is the value of faith? When we talk about religion, why is faith in the correct, unbelievable story God's highest moral value over love, over compassion? And so this is why I have no fear being an atheist, because even if Jesus were to come down right now, I wouldn't hide under a rock in shame or fear like Christians think I will. If there's a God that's worth worshiping, God would know the moral and ethical reasons why I chose to leave faith and why I still chose to live a moral life with no thought of reward as an atheist. If God was good, that would mean something. If God is a narcissist and he said, well, you didn't have the correct, you didn't have faith in the correct, unbelievable, supernatural story, so you're going to burn in hell forever with anyone who was born at the wrong place at the wrong time, so they worship the wrong God. That's not a God worthy of worship. And I know that's not the best of Christian apologetics, but it's the message that I more often get from Christians, which is this idea that above all else, you have to have faith in the correct story, and that is more important to God. Like, faith is the pinnacle of your hierarchy of values. And that's bullshit. Like, even Richard Rohr, who I would say does Christian mysticism really beautifully, like really beautiful theology, a really beautiful way of life, says the first thing that he's going to ask God is, why did he make us so incredibly superstitious so that we're always creating gods and religions? We always look back and say that we're wrong. If faith mattered so much to God, why make us so superstitious? That was a tangent. Back to the movie. This is when people ask me, okay, so, maybe teaching belief, especially delusional belief, isn't the moral value we should be teaching with our kids. So what do you do with your kids and Santa? So let's look at the research. Research shows that lying to your kids tells them that lying is okay. And most child development experts agree that lying to your kids about Santa is not good for them. So, unlike belief in Santa, which is usually something that children grow out of, dishonesty is something that children grow into. This is from Robert Feldman. He's a psychology professor who studied lying. And when children and adolescents purposefully tell lies to mislead, he found that first graders are pretty unconvincing liars, seventh graders are okay, and college students are experts. The reason that they grow into lying is because parents show them how to lie with our own behavior. And one study from the University of California, San Diego, found that preschoolers and young elementary school children who had been lied to by the experimenter were both more likely to cheat, like peek into something that they weren't supposed to, and also more likely to lie about whether or not they had peeked. So most experts say that if your kid is asking if Santa is real or not, they are old enough to know the difference between reality and fiction. And children are sometimes devastated when you find out that you'd been lying to them. Now, there are times to teach what's called pro-social lying that these experts say, like telling your grandma thank you for a present, even if you hate it. Like, you don't have to tell grandma, I loved that present. We don't have to lie that much, but you can say you can teach kids, tell grandma thank you, even though this present is insane. That's pro-social lying that we do need to learn how to do for relationship building. But it's not okay to lie about Santa. We lie about our children for reasons that we can support. So sometimes we do it to cover unpleasantness. So mommy and daddy weren't fighting, we were just talking. Or I'm sure that someone just took your toy by accident. Other times we lie to perpetuate cultural myths, like sports people are good role models, or anyone can succeed if they work hard. These are myths. And most people treat Santa as if they're one of these pleasing myths. But the question that we have to ask from the Santa story is, what value are we teaching here where it's worth lying to our kids about? If only good children get presents, what does that say about poor families? What value judgments are being formed? What if the children themselves are poor? How does this narrative impact their sense of self-worth? Children are more alert to these implications than we give them credit for. So maybe it's okay to lie about some things because of the developmental age of the kid, but I would say give it up for Santa. Also, we know that Santa primes young children's brains for what they will eventually think about God. And this is not conscious, this is a subconscious process, but they have this sense as young kids that God is this white bearded man that watches you when you're sleeping and when you're awake, and has a naughty list and a nice list. And when you're good, you get transactional presents. We know that in a child's mind, God is a mixture of church and Santa and their father. And so is that really the myth that you want to perpetuate? Like, what good is that doing for the child to teach them this idea of this Santa Claus God that's watching you all the time, that gives you things when you are good, and so relationships are then transactional. So no, I don't do Santa with my kids, and guess what? Christmas is still quite magical. We do Star Wars gingerbread man, and we have the sorting hat on top of our tree. We have a ton of Christmas traditions that are magical. And so some people will say here, well, like, if you're doing Harry Potter and Star Wars, like, why can't we just do pretend Santa? Because my kids know that Star Wars isn't real, and they know that Harry Potter isn't real, and we can play in that space. And some people, you can do Santa in a way that's maybe playful and not real, but for Santa, it's requiring belief in order to play that game. And so that's something that, for me as a value, I don't want to lie to my kids. I want them to trust me. And I also want to teach them that we can fall in love with Christmas or life or fantasy without actually having to believe stories that aren't true. That's the difference. We have Harry Potter Christmas, we say Happy Christmas, but there's no delusion about whether or not this is real. And I have to say, my kids knowing for sure in their bones that when I say I promise, I'm not lying to them, that they can take that to the bank and bet their life on it, that having that kind of trust in our relationship has been a far better payoff than whatever extra magic Christmas, could have been because we brought in Santa. Now, with that being said, I do have to tell you that if you decide to do Santa, it's not going to be the thing that fucks your kid up. That is not going to be the thing that sends them to therapy. In one recent study by Dr. Drew Curtis, he asked a bunch of college students how much their parents had promoted the myth of Santa Claus. And he also asked them how they felt about it and then their relationship with their parents currently. And most reported that their parents had lied about Santa a lot. They also viewed their parents' Santa lies as being dishonest. Some of them even really recall being hurt when they realized that they had been hoodwinked for years and lied to for years. But fortunately for parents, he also found that there's no link between how much they had lied about Santa and having a good relationship with these parents currently. So if you have a good relationship and everything else is good and developing trust in the relationship, essentially kids can learn that it's a tradition to lie about Santa to your kids, and they can compartmentalize that as an exception. So whether or not you do Santa isn't going to have a drastic effect on the overall relationship with your kids. But for me, valuing critical thinking and honesty and trust and learning how to play in life without having to believe things ranked higher for me in my moral values than playing this little game. So I never did Santa with my kids. Neil deGrasse Tyson does something interesting. I think he did this with the Tooth Fairy and Santa, where he used it as an exercise for kids to essentially ask questions and figure it out. Like, how did you know it was the Tooth Fairy? What experiment could you run to check? And then they would praise the kid when they did an experiment, like hiding a tooth, but didn't tell their parents. And then the Tooth Fairy didn't come. And they're praised for developing their cognition, which is what should have happened in the Polar Express movie. Like, that's kind of a cool idea. I didn't do that, but that fits with his value system of valuing scientific thinking. So I will say that if you're doing Santa and you're watching really, movies that really emphasize that belief is good and thinking and doubting is bad, and they're also going to church where they are also getting the message of demonizing critical thinking and valuing turning off your brain and just believing, all of that together is brainwashing that faith is your highest, moral value. And I don't think it should be. And one of the best things about deconstruction is that my brain, my values, my conscience, my inner voice, my emotions, they all have a valid place at the table. I never have to silence them so that faith gets the king's seat at the table and faith just silences everything else. That's not inner peace and wholeness, and it never will be. And it is one of the problems with religion, is that you don't get that inner peace and wholeness because you do have to quiet lots of other parts of you in order to have faith be the king at the table. So thank you for listening to my rant. Let me know in the comments, am I too triggered about the Polar Express? What do you guys do about Santa? And then let me know in the comments, and subscribe here for more videos. I'm going to be doing a lot this month around Christmas and deconstruction because I know that can be a hard time for people. And as always, stay no nonsense out there.